In America, the right to bear arms is one of our most treasured amendments and rights as a United States citizen. How many of us live in areas in the United States where gun ownership is looked down on? Heck, it's not even only looked down on, it is a taboo in some places, in some arenas, in some social circles to even discuss guns. There are places in America that encourage gun ownership. Heck, there's guns that are passed down from generation to generation. And I just didn't understand what the problem was. I want to find out what the differences are and why there is such a taboo about gun ownership in states like New York.
Locked and loaded, standing tall. The right to bear arms, it's for us all.
New York, New York. Big city and dreams, but everything in New York ain't always what it seems. You might get fooled if you come from out of town, but I'm down by law and I know my way around.
You fool, baby.
The birth of control. New York City, 1911. The streets are loud. Horses and trolleys fight for space. Tenements overflow with families chasing the American dream. And beneath the noise, fear is growing. Not fear of armies, not fear of invasion. Fear of who is arriving and what they might carry in their pockets. In the saloons, whispers of anarchists. In the newspapers, headlines blaming immigrants. In City Hall, politicians searching for control. The gun isn't the enemy, yet the man who holds it is. In 1911, New York will pass a law that changes everything. A law that doesn't ban guns, but decides who deserves one. Its name will be remembered for more than a century, the Sullivan Act. And from this moment forward, gun ownership in New York will no longer be a right, but a permission. New York. By 1910 to 1911, New York City was rapidly growing due to mass immigration, especially from the southern and eastern Europe. Several assassinations across the United States, not just in New York, raised the alarm. President William McKinley was assassinated in 1901. Other officials and labor leaders were killed nationwide. These events sparked a national panic about concealed pistols, especially in the cities. The idea took hold that easy access to handguns equals political instability. At the time, newspapers and politicians frequently blamed Italians and Sicilian immigrants for the violence in the streets of New York. Well, sometimes they blamed the anarchists, and many times the labor organizers. This was their fault for all this violence and crime. So, eventually, handguns were associated with black hand extortion gangs and street-level organized crime. Tammany Hall was an American political organization that was founded in 1786. It became the main local political machine of the Democratic Party. Tammany Hall controlled Democratic Party nominations and political patronage in Manhattan for over a century through its organized network of loyal, well-rewarded, and largely Irish Catholic district and precinct leaders. Enter Big Tim Sullivan, the law's namesake. Timothy Big Tim Sullivan was a powerful Tammany Hall politician. He controlled New York City's politics through patronage and loyalty. Because so much attention was being put on the Southern crime wave, it became a form of political control, fear of immigrant violence, gang activity, and machine politics. And from this, the Sullivan Act. Because many of Tammany Hall politicians had strong ties and connections to the underworld, they were able to have a stern, strict control over the politics and help enforce them in New York. One of the legacies of Big Tim was the Sullivan Act. The Sullivan Act introduced the legislation party in response to a marked increase in high publicized violent street crime below 14th Street in New York. The law required licenses for New Yorkers to possess firearms small enough to be concealed. Private possessions of such firearms without a license was a misdemeanor, and carrying them in public was a felony. In actuality, the Sullivan Act wasn't just about public safety. It was about who could be trusted with power and who could not. In the early 20th century, New York gun control wasn't colorblind, class blind, or politics blind. It became the gatekeeper. This Sullivan Act specifically targeted these small pistols for anyone that was carrying, that was poor or working class, not necessarily the wealthy elites. This now gave police and local officials discretion that allowed them to have selective enforcement, and it let the political allies keep their guns while opponents were denied permits. This act didn't ban guns outright, it made them permission-based. If you were wealthy, if you were politically connected or friendly with the police, you got a permit. If you were poor, an immigrant, or a political dissident, you often didn't. A lot of the times this enforcement was uneven and selective. In reality, in practice, crime didn't meaningfully drop. Arrests skyrocketed among immigrants, and police power increased dramatically. This set the foundation for New York's May issue system that lasted over 100 years, right up until Bruen. Act 2. A system hardens, 1911 to 2012. Permission becomes the rule. The Sullivan Act was never repealed. It didn't fade away. It evolved. Through world wars, through prohibition, through organized crime and political upheaval, New York quietly normalized an idea that most America rejected, that the government decides who may carry a firearm. By the mid-20th century, this discretion had a name: proper cause. A standard so vague it meant everything and nothing at the same time. If you're wealthy, politically connected, or famous, you often qualified. If you were an average citizen, your safety was not enough. Fear writes the law. In 2012, America watched another tragedy unfold. And in New York, fear moved faster than debate. In January of 2013, the New York SAFE Act was passed. Overnight. With little public input, with sweeping consequences. The SAFE Act expanded bans on so-called assault weapons, required registration of previously illegal firearms, and redefined what ownership meant in the Empire State. Rifles like the AR-15, legal in most of America, became prohibited by features alone, not function, not misuse, but design. While the rest of the country was allowed full-featured AR-15s, New York now had this new rifle ban, which made sure that you did not have certain features if you wanted to use the rifle with its intended removable magazines. You weren't able to have a folding telescopic stock. You could not have a protruding pistol grip that fell below the trigger. You could not have thumb hole stocks. You weren't allowed to have a second hand grip or protruding grip that can be held by the non-shooting hand. You also could not have a bayonet mount. In addition, you could not have a threaded barrel that would allow for a flash suppressor, a muzzle brake, a muzzle compensator, or a grenade launcher. Today, if a New Yorker wants to buy an AR-15, you would have to purchase one that is considered New York compliant. That is with none of the features, or with all of the features and a pinned magazine. Pinned magazine will prohibit the user from switching magazines. The fear is, in mass shootings, you can expend multiple rounds, and this New York compliant AR-15 prohibits that. While politicians attempted to justify the SAFE Act, there was indeed a pushback and protest from gun owners.
Number one salesman for firearms in America is the president.
It appears Governor Andrew Cuomo might be helping too. In the wake of New York's new gun laws, big crowds turned out to the annual gun show at the Empire State Plaza Convention Center in Albany. The show has been held here for over 30 years. It's in the very same room where Cuomo stood a few weeks ago and gave a fiery State of the State address pushing for more gun control.
No one hunts with an assault rifle. No one needs 10 bullets to kill a deer.
Chris Busta and his friend Brian Severino both bought guns.
Got a Remington 1100, 1966. It's a skeet gun, 12 gauge.
Severino bought a modern semi-automatic shotgun he plans to use for hunting, but he says the feel of this show has changed in recent years.
Everything's turned into an antique and pistol show here, not more of the modern guns that were here.
Busta says he feels like some of the new state rules, like reducing clip capacity from 10 bullets down to 7, won't solve the problem of gun violence.
New York's new gun control law, the SAFE Act, can be a little confusing for gun owners across the state. That's why state police representatives are trying to explain it for people who might have questions. Now, WNYTV's Joe Malillo went to one of these informational sessions up in Tompkins County this evening. He joins us live in the studio with our top story tonight. Joe.
JB, although state police were there to talk about the SAFE Act, it seemed the majority of the people in the audience came to protest the new law.
National Guard in 1902. 3, you the citizens.
In Ithaca Tuesday night, state police were trying to explain some of the facts behind the toughest gun laws in the country.
How do I get them to comply with the law? Basically, people are trying to comply with the law and they're cooperative, but they're asking good questions about how I do comply with the law.
I think hosting an information session like this is extremely important to get the information out. And under normal circumstances, something like this ideally would have happened before the law passed. But getting it in now is still great.
Usually questions like, if I own an assault rifle, do I have to give it up? And when do I need to register are what comes out of these meetings. For the record, the answer is if you own an assault rifle, it won't be taken away from you, but you will need to register it by April 15th of this year. But the panel of experts were facing questions like this.
And my question to you is not since I can't ask why, or since I can't ask what, or since I can't ask who. My question to you is, when are you going to deem this New York SAFE Act unlawful and unconstitutional?
Gun owners in Tuesday night's meeting were still upset about the law, but their words fell on deaf ears.
Now, as a state police member, we didn't have a hand in passing the law. We're not legislators, and it's not our law, but it's going to be incumbent upon us in a lot of ways to enforce the law. So we want the people to know exactly what the law is about. We're not here to discuss why the law is. We're just here to discuss what is it, what it entails, and how it affects the general public.
Act 4, Bruen, 2022. The crack in the wall. For over 100 years, New York stood apart until two ordinary citizens challenged the system. They weren't criminals, they weren't extremists. They simply wanted to carry a firearm for self-defense and were told no. Their case reached the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court. In 2022, the Supreme Court ruled the Second Amendment does not require you to prove your worth. It requires the government to justify its limits using history, not fear. The right to bear arms belongs to the people, not to the permission slip. Act 5. New York responds. Same idea, new packaging. New York complied, but only on paper. Proper cause disappeared, and in its place rose something new. Sensitive locations. More training, more fees, more restrictions on where a licensed citizen could stand while armed.
In 2022, the Supreme Court invalidated a New York state requirement obligating applicants for pistol permits to show that they had proper cause to obtain permission to carry a firearm outside the home or business for personal protection. In response, New York State passed the Concealed Carry Improvement Act, which establishes that the possession of a firearm in a sensitive area is prohibited.
In modern New York, you must have a license and still have nowhere to carry. Act 6. Carrying in New York today. Where you can and can't. You can carry concealed with the New York pistol license. You can transport firearms under strict rules and can carry in limited public spaces, not designated sensitive. But you cannot carry in schools or campuses, government buildings, public transportation, places of worship, bars and restaurants serving alcohol, Times Square, private property unless explicitly permitted. In New York, the question isn't if you're licensed, it's where you're standing. Act 7. Reciprocity. An island until itself. New York recognizes no other license. Now, this is almost unique in the United States. Many states will recognize other licenses in certain other states, but New York recognizes none. Not Florida, not Texas, not Pennsylvania. Carrying across state lines turns lawful citizens into criminals at the border. But if you hold a New York license, many other states will recognize it. That's a big difference. Final act. For over a century, New York has asked the same question. Who can be trusted? Courts answered one way. The legislator answered another. And the people are left navigating the space between liberty and control. This isn't just a story about guns. It's a story about power and who holds it. History doesn't disappear. It repeats unless challenged.
They say freedom ain't free. Well, I paid my dues. Red, white, and blue, I know my roots. Locked and loaded, standing tall. The right to bear arms, it's for us all. I want a gun, I want to fight. Stand for my freedom, stand for my rights. Shall not be infringed, it's plain to see. You don't get to take it away from me. Passed down strong, from father to son. Protection, tradition, day one. I ain't looking for trouble, but I won't back down. Defend what's mine on solid ground. I want a gun, I wanna fight. Stand for my freedom, stand for my rights. Shall not be infringed, it's plain to see. You don't get to take it away from me. We the people, we hold the line. This ain't just words, it's how we shine. From the mountains to the plains, our liberty still remains. Locked and loaded, standing tall. The right to bear arms, it's for us all. You don't get to take it away from me. Don't get to take it away from me. We the people, we hold the line. This ain't just words, it's how we shine. From the mountains to the plains, our liberty still remains. Locked and loaded, stand